All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast. Now, there is plenty to discuss tonight as the NCAA is simply at the crossroads. You look at it right now, they've got a lot on their plate. And what's happening right now is either going to make or break a lot of their programs. And I mean, it's a lot of things. I mean, we've seen recently with the Supreme Court ruling that came down. We also saw, the issues in regards to name, image, and likeness for players. And that has been approved in certain states. And then also the potential expansion of the college football playoffs. So, you look at a lot of things. There's plenty on the docket right now in regards to that. And you know what? It's a situation for the NCAA. We have to wait and see how things play out. But I mean, first and foremost, you look at the college football playoff. And I mean, the powers that be for this playoff system. They're looking to expand from 4 teams to 12 teams. And I mean, and just in hearing that and seeing that, you know what, it's a situation where they, like I said before, they're going to be opening up Pandora's box. The reason why I say it is, you look at it right now, and I think 4 teams is enough. And, the reason why I say that is because, I mean, you look at it, for the most part, with every single year of the playoff, we've had blowouts in in the semifinals. And, with that said, do we really need more of that? It's one of those where, we went from a situation where we were basically having a clear-cut national champion to a situation where, there was a second team that had a gripe. And we went from a second team having a gripe to a third team having a gripe. Thus, the 14 playoff system was created. And of course, when you have a 14 playoff system, there's going to be a fifth team that has a gripe. So now we're going to a situation where we could potentially have a 12-team playoff system. And guess what? The 13th team is going to have a gripe. I mean, there's really only two, maybe 3 teams that have a legit gripe each season in regards to having their say in regards to being a national champion. I think this situation right here just totally diminishes that. You look at it from the standpoint to say, hey, what does this say about conference championship week in in college football? You also have a situation in regards to what does this say about the regular season? We already have a situation where teams are playing 12 regular season games, and in some cases, 13 or 14 games in the regular season. Then once you throw the conference championship weekend into that, that's an additional game. And then if you throw the college football playoff into it, some of these teams are playing 15 or 16 games. So that's basically nearly an NFL schedule. And, I have Coach Ward with me tonight to discuss this. So, Coach, how do you feel or about this potential expansion in the college football playoff?
Well, you have to look at it as a good thing, William.
Oh,
Think about the NC.
your screen is lopsided, man.
Hold on.
There you go. Okay, okay.
Give me 1 second, bro. This is what happens when your daughter does your stuff for you and you're not here. Give me 1 second. Well, this is what happens when you have more teams and give more teams a chance to win. So you look at the NCAA field of 64, you have Cinderella stories, you have teams that have a chance that didn't have a chance any otherwise. And what will happen in this particular situation is that you're going to have more teams with a chance to win. And I have to look at it as a good thing. I mean, you will have more teams playing more games, but maybe they will do something in the back end, like shorten some of the regular season games to compensate. I mean, it's all not etched in stone yet as to what they're going to do in terms of the playoff situation and how they're going to have it set up. But I'd love to see you said 12 teams, right?
That is correct.
Who wouldn't want to see a 12 seed team go all the way to the top and win it all? I mean, that's what sports is all about. That's what makes it great, you know?
Well, I mean, for me, I knew that it was inevitable that this system was going to be expanded. I personally am not a fan of it because, again, you have four teams, two, maybe three teams have a legit, say as far as like, okay, you know what, we've got a shot to go out there and be national champions. But again, every single year for the most part in the semifinals, we've had blowouts. So why do we need, to further, bring this thing along? I mean, do we really need to see the Alabamas and Clemson's of the world, blow out another team by 40 points in an additional round? I really don't think so. I mean, I know why they're doing it. It's all about the cash cow, and they're chasing it. They're chasing that. But the thing is, when you do that at the same time, you're basically watering down your product. And I mean, the way that the current four-team system is, it does allow you to keep something in place in regards to the bowl games. And I said something, not everything, because again, the bowl system itself has been watered down as well because there's just too many of them. But you look at it right now, we really don't need, any additional teams. I mean, you look at it, okay, you have these conference commissioners, you have these school administrators from non-SEC schools, and now they're starting to beef about, okay, why does the SEC rather get a team every year? Or we saw a scenario where the SEC got two teams a couple of years ago when Alabama and Georgia actually met in the national championship game. This was all something that was discussed previous by the powers that be, as far as potentially two SEC teams making that field of four. Now, with that said, we haven't seen the Pac-12 make the college football playoff in several years, and I mean, rightfully so. The Pac-12 is really lagging behind in regards to all of the other Power Five conferences. We've seen Oklahoma dominate the Big 12, but then every single year when Oklahoma gets to the playoff, with the exception of their Rose Bowl loss to Georgia, they get blown out. So, I mean, how many times do we need to sit up here and see that? So, I mean, Ohio State, they've basically been the steady of the Big Ten Conference. But I mean, on the flip side, one thing I will say, you see the way that the current system is. Okay, it does not have an avenue for the little guy of the sport, to get in there. And I say, a Mountain West school such as Boise, the MAC conference, Conference USA, the American Athletic Conference. There really is no segue for these guys to go in there and get it. And I mean, at the other token of it, I mean, you have these mega conferences, which, again, is another money grab. If you have, a 14 team conference, you're going to have a situation where all of these teams aren't going to play each other. My thing is this: instead, and I know they're not going to do it, but instead of looking to expand the college football playoff, why don't you have these conferences that have 14 teams? Why don't you have them play 10 conference games? Because, some of these teams in the SEC East don't have to deal with the SEC West, and the SEC West has been much tougher than the SEC East in recent years. A lot of these teams in the Big Ten West don't have to deal with that gauntlet out east, having to face Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State each year. So, I mean, there are scenarios to make this thing better. I agree with you. If you're going to expand this playoff, then you really have to, take away from the regular season. Maybe cut down on the games by 2 games. But then to me, that also gives an opportunity for the little guy to be lost in the shuffle, because if you're going to do that, then there's going to be more impotence on, playing a stronger out of conference schedule. So, a D2 school or a D3 school that was, leaning on, getting that payday from an Oklahoma or an Alabama, they no longer have that situation. So, I mean, there's a lot that's on the table here, but I mean, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Well, for me, I have to take it in the competition area, because once you line up and the ball is kicked off, anything can happen. So what you're referring to me, in my opinion, goes to their ability to get the top-notch recruits. Pac-12 has not been able to recruit like this SEC has. And in the past, they were. Everybody wanted to go to California to play. Everybody wanted to go to USC and UCLA. Those were the best schools in terms of, the look. And now everybody wants to go to Alabama. William, it's like even in Brooklyn now, as a youth coach, all the kids want to go to E Hall, which is now Erasmus. We were kids. Nobody wanted to go to Erasmus. It was a dump. But, you make your environment desirable based on who you are and the culture you create. And it can be created anywhere. We see it over and over again. It's just that Nick Saban is still alive, and he has a lock on it, and he has a lock on the culture, and he has a lock on the NFL pathway, and that's what everyone wants, whether you meet the measurables or not. Kids that are high recruits are going to UCLA and not getting drafted. Kids that are high recruits are going to these schools and transferring out. Things we didn't see in the past. You can't blame Alabama and Georgia and the other teams that in the NFL, in the NCAA playoffs, Ohio State, for keeping their programs in a space to where they're desirable for the NFL teams, because they're the ones that are getting 5 kids in the first round every year. 13 kids drafted in the draft every year. That's not something that is happening at UCLA or USC. So, you blame the conference, but, it comes down to recruiting. Who do you get to come to your school? To put it in perspective, every once in a while, these other colleges get diamonds in the rough. Kids that were underdeveloped or undercoached at another school, and they get there, and then boom, they develop. Khalil Mack ended up at Buffalo. How? He developed late. He was a different position at school. They got him. They put him in the right position. Next thing you know, he's a 4th pick in the draft out of Buffalo. University of Buffalo.
J.J. Watt started out of Central Michigan. I mean, it happens,
Right, but he ended up at Wisconsin. That never
Exactly.
happened to Khalil Mack.
Yeah.
So you got to make sure your recruiting game is up. And to me, I think that's the real difference. Nick Saban's recruiting so many running backs that it's 4 stringers or first-round picks later on. It's stupid, but at the same time, all right, look at that. Justin Fields had to transfer to Georgia in order to play, and he was a top 20 pick. So you can't look at it like that. To me, it goes all the way down to recruiting. Who do you get to come to your school, and who can you develop? Sometimes it's a crapshoot. You never know what you're gonna get when you get a kid. Sometimes you are the right combination of coaching and the position you put them in and your system. Boom, there you go. Got a star.
Well, I mean, to your point, one thing that is hurting the Pac-12, USC has not been consistently as strong as they were maybe a decade before, and a lot of that can be due to the sanctions. It takes some time to get back on track. With that said, to me, one of the things that's hurting the Pac-12, California, the state of California, is their fertile recruiting ground. And I mean, everybody within the Pac-12, of course, like in the old days of the Pac-10, they really flourished there, especially with UCLA and USC. The problem is those top kids from California are not staying. We've seen situations where they go to Ohio State. We see situations where, they're going to Alabama, and the Clemsons of the world. So that really, is a game changer right there. And that's something that USC is looking to get back to, as far as having, their blanket, if you will, over the state of California. Because I mean, let's not forget, regardless if it was, the dynasty under Pete Carroll, or, John Robinson, or, John McKay, whoever the coach was, USC for the most part really didn't have to go beg a kid from the state of California to stay home, if you will, and play for them. that has changed, and that's something that USC is looking to get back to. And the Pac-12 schools as a whole, they have to try to keep their top talent there. In regards to the SEC and focusing on Alabama, they don't lose kids out of the state of Alabama. If they do, they lose the kid to Auburn. That's it. Like all of those kids are staying within that state. And in regards to quote unquote SEC country, the non-SEC school that consistently has success, getting kids out of that region is Clemson. But of course, Clemson and Dabo Sweeney, they had to build upon that. But you look at Ohio State. Ohio State, of course, is a national brand. They get the top kids out of Ohio every year, and of course, that big 33 game between Pennsylvania and Ohio. Ohio State gets their fair share of guys out of that, as does Michigan and, of course, Penn State. So it's about, securing the region. And I think since the Pac-12 has been unable to do that, they have really, fallen behind the wayside, if you will, in regards to the other Power Five conferences. So, I mean, that like the recruiting aspect definitely is hurting them. We look at this, the transfer portal, that is something else that is a game changer right now for the NCAA, regardless if it's football or basketball. I mean, you see it where, kids nowadays, they are not patient because there was a time, freshmen really did not play D1, whether it was football or men's basketball. And for you to be able to do that, from a basketball standpoint, you had to be, a Michael Jordan. You had to be a Patrick Ewing. From a football standpoint, you had to be a Tony Dorsett or a Dan Marino or a John Elway or an Eric Dickerson, guys like that. Nowadays, guys know that, hey, I don't have to stay here. I have my opportunity, to move around and go someplace which is going to give me the best opportunity to take my game to the next level, whether it be in the NBA or the NFL. But I mean, I look at it and, things are changing so much with the NCAA. Name, image, and likeness is a big thing because now these kids are going to have an opportunity to make some money off of their quote unquote brand, and rightfully so because they deserve it. Because these schools make millions, and I mean hand over fist, and these kids get, for the most part, nothing. So I think that is a game changer right there. The Supreme Court ruling right now in regards to student athletes being quote unquote student athletes, because again, these schools make so much money off of these kids. I think what is going to happen with it all, and even with this expansion of the playoff, it's just gonna like separate the haves from the have-nots even more. Because I mean, you're talking about the playoff, for if you will, with a potential 12-team playoff, you're probably going to see two or three teams from the SEC. So I mean, it's really, to me, I don't think it's going to solve anything in regards to the Power Five conferences, non SEC Power Five conferences, having to say something about that. I mean, maybe the Big Ten will probably get two teams. I know last year was an oddity for the ACC. They quote unquote got two teams because Notre Dame was part of the conference last year, and Notre Dame might as well just join the SEC. I mean the ACC. I mean they're just trying to have their cake and eat it too, as far as that NBC deal as an independent. But they play so many games every year versus ACC schools. But for the most part, I think with a 12-team playoff, the SEC is going to keep their position as the top conference in college football.
I don't see that changing either, Will, because they are the number one recruiters of the top talent. They recruit the top linemen every year. The top linemen go to Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, and that's on both sides of the ball, and that's where the game is won. So you'll never defeat these guys. Now, what you might see, I mean, you might see more than two or three SEC teams. These guys, these teams are so powerful in the trenches that these other schools just cannot deal with the amount of strength and athleticism that they have in the interior linemen and the D tackles and the stuff like that. And I know the defensive end, if you think about that, those guys almost always come from those schools, like Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State. Every year you got a first round and out of one of those schools. They don't miss. You know why? Because they're getting 3, 5, 10, and 7, and 8, and 20 recruit, and somebody pans out, no matter who beats who out in the process, you know. But as far as the likeness thing goes, it's going to be a battle of what works out in the best interest of the kid earliest. Now, what I like about it is you have these kids that I deem college football stars. They're only stars in college, right? They don't become stars in the pros. They have a chance to make some money. I like that. I like that. And I mean, to name these guys would be a lot. I mean, all right, Tim Tebow's not a guy you really think we should name, but imagine if Tim Tebow was a guy making money in college. He'd have been a millionaire before he got to the NFL because he won 2 Heisman trophies, and he was probably the best college football player that you or I have ever seen in our lifetime, bro.
Well, I mean, he won one. He was a runner up to Sam Bradford.
But you know what I
But
mean.
yeah, right. But no, but
You get what I'm saying. He
listen,
was the most galvanizing college football player in our lifetime, right? So, and he stayed there long enough to make himself all of that. Now, in basketball, it might be different because these kids are one and done. So they'll have a year to maximize their potential, and then they could be out. But football, you're talking 3 years. So if you have a guy that's good as freshman year, then he can make some money. All right, I got a name for you, Bryce Love. He dominated at Stanford. He hasn't played it down for the Redskins because he's been hurt because he had so many carries at Stanford.
yeah, I mean, the Stanford running backs, they fall into that category because they play behind a great offensive line, but then they carry the rock so much there that it just doesn't transcend to the NFL. I mean, Toby Gerhardt is a prime example of that because I mean, you remember his last couple of years at Stanford, he was tearing it up. Christian McCaffrey, I mean, he's been injured since he's been in the NFL, but he has not come close to showing the productivity that he had, once upon a time at Stanford. But you think about it, Tim Tebow, of course, a guy like him, Vince Young, who did not have the success at Texas that he did, pardon me, in the NFL that he did at Texas, but at the same time, Vince Young is another guy who, would have been, a millionaire. I mean, you look at what Reggie Bush went through at USC, just another name. You think about, for me, AJ Green. I mean, you remember AJ Green, I believe his last year at Georgia was suspended for a few games for, selling his jersey. And I mean, come on. I mean, you figure, I mean, all of us can go like to
The
eBay.
Terrell Pryor deal. Remember
Right,
Terrell Pryor?
right,
He got caught up,
with
yeah,
Tattoo
doing
Gate.
doing the yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I mean, these guys, you can go on eBay right now and find, you know, their jerseys,
Johnny
things like
Manziel.
right. And I mean, like these schools can say whatever they want, nobody, and I mean, nobody is sitting out there and, buying, apparel from these schools, just because they like the school. No, they're going because of what they've seen on the football field or on the basketball court, taking it back to another era. You think about the Georgetown Hoyas of the 1980s when John Thompson was a head coach, and of course, Patrick Ewing was the Hoya Destroyer. How many kids out there started buying Georgetown apparel from seeing that? Or the Fab Five. I mean, Fab Five put Michigan gear on the map and Nike
Huh.
because, the Fab Five, that first year that they made the Final Four, they were rocking the Hirachis. And, we were young kids at that time. A lot of
Huh.
people wanted to get those Hirachi sneakers. You know what I'm saying? So like, and we
We'll
could go,
never forget. They single-handedly changed how basketball uniforms are made because they demanded longer shorts. Remember my freshman year, we called them the coochie cutters or they were real short. That next year, we got those baggy shorts, man.
yeah.
We had to have them. You know what I mean? We had to have the baggy shorts, bro. The mesh, we had the polyester. Oh man, that was horrible.
Yeah,
Be happy you never had to play in those, man.
well, I mean, I played football and wrestle, so I mean that's enough right there. So, but,
Polyester.
but I mean the thing is like you look at it, and these guys would have gone to the bank, as far as making money, and rightfully so. I mean, we saw it in the '90s when like shoe companies, such as Nike, started to come to the forefront and be outfitters for these schools. And what happened? They started selling these kids jerseys. And these guys weren't making a dime off of that. So I think this is a game changer. These kids now have opportunities to make appearances, and get money. Also, let's say they could work out something with a car dealership in that region. So instead of having to worry about, well, okay, why is this guy driving a Benz or something like that? You know what? Hey, he can have an endorsement deal, or like do something with from his name, image, and likeness, and he has an opportunity to better his situation. And I think that's right, because you look at these big time college football programs. When they go to these big bowl games, they get millions of dollars. You know what I'm saying? Why can't these kids get something? You think about these college basketball programs when they make the NCAA tournament, how much money that generates for those schools right there. So you know what? I am all for it. And I think at the end of the day, might not be today, but I think if we come back and check on this topic again in an additional 10 years from now, the NCAA is either going to have to make adjustments, or they're going to have a serious problem on their hands in regards to how they've gone about quote unquote business for all of this time.
Well, the way they pitch their business is they are the amateur athletics preparing these guys for the professional, right? And they had us all with the Jedi mind trick, making us believe that this is what they really were doing. In essence, they were just really exploiting young athletes, because some kids will only be great college football players or college basketball players because their games don't all translate to the NBA or the NFL. Because you will have guys that don't seem like they're good in the amateur rank, that their games translate to the pros. And it's kind of sickening, because you have guys, hit the, what happened to this guy or what happened to that guy? Oh, their game simply didn't translate. But now, because you can make money now, then you can make something off of what you are right now. And that's where I like it. Does it help the Dukes and the other teams where they are going to get even more of these good guys, the best players in the country? Maybe. But they will always be a Damian Lillard, that guy that you didn't think was going to be that good, that had the determination that you couldn't count on, that he will become something no matter what you do. So I don't know if that stops that from happening, because I believe in sports that's always going to happen, because you will always have that guy that has something you can't measure. And when you're recruiting, you're trying to measure uh, how big they're going to get, how hard they're going to work. You're going to talk to the coaches, this one, that one. I've done seen it all. And you're trying to say, all right, this kid's going to be that. But there's always that other kid that you're not looking at. You might not think. John Morant's a good example. He's the one in the other gym that nobody's looking at, that's working, and he's getting better every day. And you may not know that he's going to become something. And we're still going to see that. So no matter what they do or how this pans out, they're going to be kids like that.
So 10 years from now, where do you see the NCAA in regards to the name, image, and likeness situation, as well as college athletes being compensated, for what they do on the fields?
I really don't know where this takes us, Will. This is the beginning. This is something that we never thought we would see. We always thought it would be this way. You go to college. It's almost like work, for example. We went to high school and college together. This is weird. And our paths are different, but it didn't affect the way we made money as adults. And you have to look at it. You go to college, you get your degree, and it's supposed to work out for you, but it doesn't always work out for you. So there's no telling how this goes. I mean, I would like to think that this is something that helps these young kids make a likeness of themselves. But with the NBA and their G League deal now, that's something that we cannot forget about, because no matter what the NCAA does, because to me, I think this has to do with the basketball. Football is a different beast because you need to wait 3 years. So kids are still going to go to college to play football. This thing that they're doing now in the NCAA is about basketball, because they lost Jalen Green and a couple of guys that are going to go in the top 5 in the NBA draft to the D League. And they're going to lose some more kids coming up. So where do we go from here? I think we need to watch basketball, and basketball is going to tell us a story, not football.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like that's an excellent point right there because you look at it, I think a lot of this for the NCAA standpoint could have been alleviated for years because but it was just greed because it was like, I think if they had just given these kids something, they wouldn't have to have gotten to this point. But you know what? Since they were greedy, and once you take so much potentially from somebody, they get desperate, they get frustrated, and rightfully so in this situation. And you know what? Times are changing, and you're gonna find a judge or judges that will say, "Hey, you know what? I understand." The gripe of these young people where they're coming from. I mean, I think about the battle that Ed O'Bannon had, and everything that Ed O'Bannon said was right. I mean, you have a situation now where we had, the EA Sports brand in regards to, both college basketball and college football. And, it was a situation where, I played the college basketball game and I'm like, wait a minute. Okay, these are guys who I went to school with. And, I'm like, wow, they're in a video game. But you know what? These guys aren't getting any bread off of that, and neither are like the guys in like the power conferences either. And, again, it's, you still have live rankings in those games just like it is, in real life. And I'm like, okay, you pick up that college basketball game. Everybody, in those days when we were in college or high school, you wanted to pick the Dukes, you wanted to pick the Marylands, the Syracuses, the Georgetowns, you name it. So, again, this is because of what we see on television. And, even if it was something where you didn't want to give the kids something right away, there was an easy way to do this. Just say, you know what, put the money into an annuity. And then these kids have an opportunity to get that bread upon graduation. But, the NCAA couldn't even do that. And again, these institutions are making money hand over fist. So, you know what? I don't feel sorry for them. Kudos to the G League and the NBA for doing what they're doing because, again, we went from allowing these kids to come straight out of high school to then, okay, you have to be out of high school for a year, which is basically forcing kids to go to school for a year that don't want to be there. And I think it was a joke because you only really have to go, like, technically pass the fall semester because by the time your grades come in for the spring semester, if you're going to be a one and done guy, you're already at draft camp already. So, I mean, it's a situation where it's a joke, it's a farce, and I think all of this stuff is coming full circle, and I think the NCAA is in trouble.
I agree. And what's crazy about it is, you have to look at them like, one of these institutions that have been getting away with murder for years, almost like Philip Morris or like the NRA. Like these people have been in control of things that should have been governed a long time ago, but because of the social climate of how life has become, they are now being placed in a space where they have to answer questions they never had to answer before. And we are just the ones, to ask these questions. All right, what are you going to do right now? What are we doing right now? Are you going to be the institution that's going to fight change, or are you going to help change become a part of your legacy as an institution, and it's going to help you stay alive? Because if the NCAA fights change, they are not going to make it. But in some cases, in some ways, they're so powerful. I don't know how we supplant them, how we get them out of the way, and does it kill college athletics to the point where you don't have kids that get to go to school for free, which is what we don't want to get rid of. A and B, we don't have kids that go to school and develop and become pros that we previously didn't think would become them. So those are two things that concern me if the NCAA is just taken out of power because of what they control. Because what happened was, because of what we were given, they were still taken on the back end in some ways, but now I don't know how far that goes.
Now, you coach, a lot of youth sports. And, with that said, obviously, to be a good coach, you have to be a teacher. and you also, have to be, in some cases, a parent figure. Sometimes you have to be a motivator, a big brother. All of these different things are coming into one. With that said, how do you personally go about, educating the young people that are in front of you that, regardless if they have the potential to take their game to a next level, to be an NCAA athlete, regardless if it's D1, D2, D3, what, regardless, you still, it's a tremendous honor for you to have that opportunity to take your game to the next level. How do you go personally as far as like educating these young folks for taking that next step? And also, how do you personally go about educating these young folks who may not take that next step as far as being athletes, as far as taking the next step in their respective lives?
That's a good question. I have a kid. I think he's rather interesting. I won't say his name just because I don't want to. His uncle played in the NFL. His father was a D1 athlete. His his uncle was a D1 athlete. His cousin just got a D1 scholarship. His brother's probably going to end up going D1. He just got into a private school football. And, this kid is phenomenal, great kid. And I don't even know if I have a lot to teach him. And he's the one that all the kids look up to. And it's almost like he knows he's going to be a Division I athlete. But in some ways, his schoolwork is lacking. And, I talked to his mom and, his stepdad and stuff. And I'm like, listen, you got to really like hone this in, because no matter how talented you are, this is the thing that's going to stop you from getting where you think you need to be. You look at everybody else in your family, they all did it. And if you don't bring this all together as one, you won't do it. Will, it's weird because I have one of the most talented teams in my age group in the entire city. And I refuse to poke my chest out because I will not sacrifice the process in order to run around and just beat up on teams because I know I have more talent than them. We still have to coach, me and my staff. We still have to coach all of these kids up. I have 45 kids. I have to make sure they're ready for life and to play. And I will not sacrifice the process. And that's to answer your question. You don't sacrifice the process, Will. No matter how much talent you have, no matter how good you think you are, you don't sacrifice the process. And when you don't sacrifice the process, you don't sacrifice the results. And I said this in a group chat with my coaches. I said, winning is overrated. Nobody understood what I was talking about, because winning is overrated. You can win the game and lose in life. Winning is overrated. Winning in the game is overrated. You need to win in life. And I need to teach these kids how to win in life. And then when I'm doing that, that's when I'm doing my job. Not when I win all these titles in the city and this and that. I've done that already. Doesn't mean anything. Some of these kids I've won titles with have gone on to be freaking washouts in high school. And I feel like a shit, to be honest, because I don't feel like I did enough. And those aren't my kids. They're not biologically connected to me, but I had a dealing in their lives, and I was supposed to be someone to help them progress to the next level. And in some ways, I failed them. Not on the field, on the court, but in life.
Nah, listen, man, there's a big dynamic to that. There's a big dynamic to helping a lot of these youngsters because again, everybody's not going to be a pro athlete. There's only a small percentage of, people, that have that opportunity. I mean, you know, it's a rarity for you, if you compete on a high school level, to compete against somebody else who has a potential to be a pro athlete. You see it sometimes at the collegiate level, but still, I mean, the higher you get up, the tougher it is to make it because of the competition. But we'll have to wait and see. I mean, but what you're doing is great. It's a good opportunity for you, and it's also a good opportunity for the kids under you who are learning because there are some kids that you're working with right now who are probably going to get that opportunity to be a D1 athlete or a D2 athlete, and now with your knowledge coming before, you have that opportunity to school them, and from some of the things that you've seen personally, and some of the people that you've dealt with in the past, and I think that's great, and I think overall the more that these athletes have an opportunity to be educated and how to know their worth and their opportunity to build their brand. I think it is tremendous for these young people to have an opportunity that a generation or two generations before them never thought they were ever going to see.
It's crazy. Well, on the youth level, the hardest thing to get these kids to do is to believe that the game is not about them. And I have a group of kids that play on my offensive line. And it's funny because I would love for you to meet some of these kids because you can see how selfless they really are. And they don't play the game for themselves. They literally go out there every day and they try to make sure that all of the backs get the yards. The quarterback has time to throw. My quarterback threw for 14 touchdowns this year, kind of sort of unheard of. He had time to throw. My running backs, were some of the best in the league, and I'm pushing them to get better every day. It's weird how rare it is because I watch other teams and they don't get these kids to buy into that one thing, the selflessness of football. And I will say something here that I want to get out, and there are a lot of parents spoiling youth sports, with the selfishness of themselves, living vicariously through their kids, that is really killing it for guys like me that are just trying to teach these kids about being selfless and being a part of something bigger than themselves that is about the bigger picture that results in winning, right? It's not about winning, but it results in wins. Well, does that make sense to you?
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And that's what I'm trying to get them to believe because they think if they win, they're the greatest, but they don't necessarily have to give all of themselves all the time to get the win. And they just don't get it. But I mean, it's a tough lesson to teach because I'm still teaching it to adults and kids at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we tonight we covered a lot on this subject and topics, plural rather, because it's again, it's a broad perspective, it's a broad outlook for it. And I mean, there's a lot of things and a lot of people that are going to be affected by these decisions. So we just have to wait and see how this affects things, or the actual like rulings and breakdowns of everything, but just from the standpoint that it's going to affect a lot of stuff at the pro level, at the collegiate level, and even the high school level as well. As always, I thank you for your time. And I always tell you this, I thank you for the work that you are doing with the youth in your community. I don't, see it personally all of the time, but you know what? But there is an impact that you're making with a lot of these kids out there. And I always tell you this. I probably sound like a broken record. Props to you. You're doing a tremendous job, and keep it up. Some of these kids, I'm sure they recognize what you're doing right now. Some of them don't, but I guarantee you, at some point in all of their respective lives, they are definitely going to see the work that you are doing with them in your community.
I appreciate it. Well, I don't take time to sit down and pat myself on the back. These kids come up to me. Some of them I don't even remember their names. They walk up to me in the street. My wife is like, "Who is that?" I'm like, "I coached them at some point. I don't know." And I appreciate it, man. That's all you can ask for. I don't want anything else out of this. I don't get paid to do this, so you know, it's just the way it is, man. But somebody's got to do it, and that's what I say.
Well, there you have it, folks. And, once again, thanks so much to Coach Ward for chiming in tonight. There's a lot, like I said, to look at from the NCAA perspective, because you know what? They are at the crossroads. And, again, like I said, it's going to have a trickle down effect on so many different levels of this. We want to thank you again for checking out this podcast. And if you like what you saw and heard tonight, please feel free to hit that like button as well as the subscribe button on your device. Now, with that said, you can also check me out on Twitter at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. You can check it out. drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So, for Coach Dennis Ward, my name is William Martin, signing off. And thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge show here on YouTube.